welcome to our podcast, Bharat and Geopolitics, where we embark on a journey to explore the profound implications of India's defense indigenization on the world stage. In today's episode, we unravel the strategic shifts, geopolitical influences, and global ripple effects as India charts its course towards self-reliance in defense. Join me in extending a warm welcome to Dr. Adityanjee, whose expertise promises to illuminate the transformative journey India is undertaking in shaping the future of international relations. Dr. Adityanjee is the President of Council for Strategic Affairs. You can visit his website, thecouncilforstrategicaffairs.org, to learn more about his organization and also watch highly enlightening videos on geopolitics and keep yourself updated with global events. So welcome Dr. Adityanjee, welcome to our platform.
Thank you very much indeed. As usual, it's pleasure. And since this is continuation of the same interview, we will carry questions as we were.
Yeah. So without further ado, let's dive into the enlightening discussion. I am coming to my most interesting questions on this topic because we have seen how India is moving towards the indigenization of defense equipments. But we all know mostly we have been screwdriver technologies because we have been only assembling weapons here. We have not been developing, leaving a few weapons that we have developed indigenously. So there is not much we have done in this regard actually. So what I would like to learn from you, what do you think? Should India focus on newer technologies like laser weapons, UAVs, which are currently less in use in conventional warfare than traditional weapons like missiles, air defense, and rifles? So, I want to learn how India can conceptualize and design and develop equipment that can serve as a potent force to protect the country. So did this be done and how this should be done? So I would like to learn from you what's your idea on this topic.
So Hariprakash, let me be very clear. As far as the issue of national defense is concerned, we cannot just focus on one and neglect the other. It is not a question of either or. It's a question of everything. Anything and everything in all possible spheres. Because when it comes to nation's existence, you have to guard it zealously. In fact, there's a saying in Sanskrit, Shastrena rakshite rashtre shastra chinta pravartate. So, a nation that is defended by the most advanced weapons is the one where you can think about philosophy and other things, because you feel secure. And that security comes with total, defense coverage. It's not that, if a missile is more important than the rifle, both are important. So newer technologies are also important, and I've been a very strong votary. In fact, if you see the history, we delayed in acquiring nuclear weapons, and that had a cost for us, which we are still paying, multiple sanctions and all. So around 2011, when China conducted its ASAT test successfully, ASAT is basically anti-satellite test, using another satellite or missile to strike at the satellite in low Earth orbit. I was at that time one of the strong proponents of India also conducting ASAT tests. Government of the day did not pay heed to the suggestions. I wrote some articles on that. And finally, I think in 2018, India conducted its first ASAT test. We are talking about space weapons. But that is a kinetic kill vehicle to disable a satellite. There are other ways of, disabling satellites and all, and one of them is directed energy weapons, laser weapons.
Yes, sir.
No country would discuss in open what are the classified programs going on. But I can tell you Bharat is also working on some of these directed energy weapons. There are systems called Durga and Kali and Chess that are being developed. We may be a little behind on those because of multiple other factors, budgetary issues, because our budget allocation is not that high, and bureaucratic things and overhaul of the DRDO and defense labs since 2014. So we may be a little behind, but yes, the government of the day is working on some of these more advanced weapon systems, whether they are directed energy weapons or you mentioned drones. In fact, we are in a situation that we are purchasing 31 MBQ-9 drones from United States. These are Predator drones that are programmed to kill from United States for $3 billion. UAVs have been there for almost 25 years now. And again, we had been very slow. Pakistan has been sending these drones to, drop drugs and arms across the line of control. So it is a serious issue. And then you need anti-drone systems also. But you cannot just focus on these and neglect developing SSBNs or missiles or, for that matter, rifles. In fact, the government of the day has created a negative list because, defense forces have a lot of requirements. And you cannot be buying, if you don't manufacture locally, you will have to buy it from abroad and waste money on buying from abroad. Remember the Kargil War? During the Kargil War, we did not even have coffins for the soldiers. And they were purchased on the spot at very high cost. You need night vision goggles when you're fighting. You need actually special suits for our soldiers who are deployed on Siachen Glacier. So nothing is less important. The focus has to be overall. You cannot neglect one weapon system if security of the nation is concerned. And that also includes cyber defense. Okay. Luckily, in 2019, the government created a cyber defense agency. I don't need to say more than that. So, we were victims of cyber attack. In 2007, in one of the Agni missile tests, there was a failure. And later on, it was found out that it was a failed missile test because of a worm called sex nut worm, which was incidentally created in Israel and was being used by United States for various purposes. And till this time, it is not clear how that sex nut worm infected or infested the Indian Agni missile system. Maybe somebody was trying to block our development. Which country? Nobody knows. So again, the point I'm making is that as a visionary, as a defense planner, you cannot neglect even a small thing because that has a cost associated with it. So you have to manufacture conventional weapons also in military industrial complex, which is burgeoning at this point in time. But that we should not take our eyes with the futuristic weapon systems. Both are required and we need to be working on both.
So thank you so much actually. But what I wanted to learn from you is
Mm,
if you really want to be a potent force actually, you have to be a step ahead and
mm,
you have to just plan in that direction actually.
mm.
So how can you motivate people and work in this direction to conceptualize some new weapon system or making the current weapon system the more potent actually with the use of technology? Because I think India in the defense modernization stage, so
Mm.
this is at a very nascent stage actually, and there are many countries in the world actually. They are at the advanced stage. So
Yes,
how in
our adversaries like China are focusing on artificial intelligence, robotic soldiers, high energy directed weapons, electromagnetic pulse related weapons. So we have to be prepared for that.
yeah.
And as I said, that directed energy weapons are being considered, DRDO and its adjuncts like CHESS. CHESS is an agency based in Hyderabad, Center for High Energy Systems and Sciences. They are developing some of the directed energy weapons. Our entities like BARC and Army Design Bureau, they are also working on different directed energy weapons programs. So I mentioned two of the systems, like one was Durga,
Hmm.
directional unrestricted ray gun array, and Kali, kiloampere lineage linear injector. We are also, besides purchasing the predator drones, there are attempts to manufacture all kinds of drones indigenously in Bharat with public and private sector collaboration.
Mhm.
So yes, we have been a little slow, but situation is being corrected. How it will be helped further is improving our budgetary allocations. Right now, our budgetary allocation is not very high. If you see last 10 years budget, it is hovering around 2.7, 2.8% of our GDP. Most of the advanced countries have higher allocations above 3%. And in real terms, if you look, Bharat's defense budget is fourth at this point in time. The highest is United States, around $800 billion. Number two comes China, which is around $290 billion of declared budget. China has a problem of opacity, and the
Yeah.
guesses are that China's actual defense budget may be around to the tune of $400 billion. Third highest is now Russia because of the war in Ukraine. So their all resources are geared towards the war. So they are around $85 billion. And fourth is Bharat, around $74 billion. If you see around 2003, 2004, Bharat's defense budget was around $25 billion, whereas Chinese defense budget was around 35, $37 billion. And every year, China continued to increase its allocation for defense budget, whereas in India, it remains stagnant. And it is only after 2014 that there has been some substantial increase. Now, the question is that if you want to save the nation, you have to pay for it. So you have to increase the budgetary allocation. If you look at, a breakup of the budget, a large percentage of Bharat's defense budget goes into pensions, for retired soldiers. That should be a separate line item in the budget. That should not be part of the defense budget because those people are not actively contributing to the defense of the nation. We had this problem of four op, one rank, one pension, everyone wants higher pensions. That has nothing to do with defense. You can have a pension department of Government of India, that deals with all the pensions, whether that are pensions of defense personnel or IS officer or IFS officers or MLAs or members of parliaments or cabinet ministers. Just a government pension department, that should be a separate one. It should not be part of the defense budgetary allocation. That is point number one. Point number two is that if we are aiming to be a $5 trillion economy, and we take a conservative estimate of 3% of GDP as our defense costs, it will come to around $180 billion or $175 billion. What is our defense budget at this point in time? $74 billion. So there is an underinvestment of almost $100 billion. So you cannot plan for next 10 years or next 15 years. There are cost overruns and delays. Our Navy is not getting adequate resources. Chinese Navy has almost 790 ships and vessels. Ours has around 280. So when China is developing this strategy of string of pearls, developing ports and putting their ships there and bringing their nuclear submarines, we need to be focusing on this. And if we increase the defense allocation, we need to improve the budgetary allocation to the Navy also, which is the lowest. The highest goes to Army, then to Air Force, and then to Navy, then to DRDO, and of course now cyber defense and all that kind of thing. So we need to, rather than each service competing for it, we need to increase the absolute overlay for defense. Be real. Improve, the efficiencies, decrease the delays and cost overruns, and partly finance the defense budget by selling the equipment, and that there has been some efforts in that. Although for last 10 years, we are the top arms exporter. If you see last 20 years, we are 29th arms exporter. But if you see since 2014, we are around 25th as the arms exporter. In last 2 years, we have exported 700% higher than the previous. So our arms export are to 89 countries at this point in time, and that is around to the tune of 16,000 crore rupees. The goal is that by 2024-2025, we should be exporting around 35,000 crore rupees worth of defense equipment to other countries. That includes a lot of things, including rifles, including BrahMos, including Tejas. So the cost offset for domestic procurement have to come from defense exports and increase allocation. And that is where the crux of the problem lies. And we have to focus on reforms.
Thank you so much for your explanation. But I still want to learn more on this topic, because what I think, before research and development comes the conceptualization. There's some idea what can be developed. So like our Prime Minister, beloved Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, have initiated so many campaigns actually. So he should also initiate some campaign to involve the creative minds, like the premier institutions, the PhD students, or the general public, to come up with the ideas that can be turned into creating some potent weapons for the nation's defense actually. So do you think this is a good idea, what I am thinking about, and this is feasible, and can something like this can be done?
So I think the idea is very good. It's always important for the defense establishment to be open to ideas, because if you're close to ideas, you don't, benefit. As I gave my example that in 2011, I wrote a number of articles about India's need to conduct an ASAT test and master that technology because it has potential implications for a space war. Everything is done through satellites now. So if your satellites are being knocked down by your adversary and you don't have capability, second strike capability, or even first strike capability, you will be in the same situation as, we were laggards in acquisition of nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
The government of the day did not take the suggestion very well. I don't want to disclose, but I had discussed with one of the former national security advisors, as to why India is not doing ASAT weapon tests. There was hardly any answer given. Actually, after change of government in 2019, that suggestion was taken up. So the government of the day, does not matter who heads a government, in any country, government of the day has to make sure that national security is supreme. And I quoted to you that Sanskrit verse, Shastrena Rakshite Rashtre Shastra Chinta Pravartate. Bharat has dealt with barbarian assaults from all sides historically. If you read the history carefully, it's not that we have not been attacked. We have been attacked from all the sides. So now, since we are an independent country, it behooves us. It is our national duty, whoever is in power, to make sure that the defense of the nation is supreme. Everything else is secondary. And in that process, if the government of the day has to seek suggestions from citizens in general, scientists who may not be working in the government sector, so be it. We are adopting now begrudgingly the model of public-private sector collaboration in the defense industry. That was unusual at one point in time, because the government of the day did not trust the private players. But there are ways you can introduce safeguards. Our business houses are patriotic. You should not doubt their patriotism. They will be equal partners. They have been equal partners in various projects. Government cannot run every procurement system. So government has to be open to suggestions. It's a good suggestion, and I hope that the Ministry of Defense takes this suggestion.
So I am moving to my fourth question, and that is also a crux of this discussion actually. So how do you think India's defense indigenization impacts the global arms market dynamics?
So there was a time Saudi Arabia was the top defense importer. But over the last 10 years, if you see aggregate, India is the top defense importer. Now, why is that? Because during the 10 years from 2004 to 2014, we did not do any acquisition. Our armed forces were slagging. There was lack of spares, to the extent that once the army staff, General V.K. Singh, was forced to write a letter to the Prime Minister saying that in case of war, we will not be able to sustain the armed forces. And that's a reality. You and I know that General V.K. Singh did write that letter to Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. So after 2014, the government had to go on an overdrive for quick acquisition of weapon systems, because that was the need of the hour, because they were not available domestically. Now, of course, along with that, the government also restructured DRDO. Government has restructured the ordnance factories from a single ordnance factory depart to 7, smaller units, which are much more nimble. So there's a lot of reorganization and modernization going on. And yes, it will affect the global armed export industry, because eventually when Bharat is producing all its needs, not necessarily all, but majority of its required equipment domestically, what would be the need to purchase, from abroad? And that's a very realistic question. Unfortunately, in the past, defense acquisition was used to make money, to generate bribes, to generate party funds. We know all about that. We know about Bofors and all that sort of thing. I'll give you a very interesting example. We are talking about Tejas fighter aircraft.
Yeah.
The first attempt to develop an indigenous fighter aircraft was when? Do you know?
No.
1956.
Oh.
At that time, the then Prime Minister authorized actually development of a fighter aircraft under HAL at Bengaluru. And that project, after delays in this in 1961, developed a prototype. And actually, the aircraft came into production, I think, by 1966. They started supplying to Indian Air Force. And that fighter aircraft was called Marut. 147 Marut planes, fighter planes, were built. The tragedy was that the engine was not very powerful. It was supposed to, be powerful enough to have a speed of Mach 2 or Mach 3, but it barely had the, speed of Mach 1. At one point in time, UK government wanted a collaborative project with Rolls-Royce and HAL to develop a Rolls-Royce engine for this particular project, Marut project. Government of the day refused for whatever reason, and they couldn't find an alternative source. So finally, this was phased out. The production was stopped. Now, if we were wise enough and developed that particular engine model in collaboration with Rolls-Royce, which UK was willing to work with, the government of the day said it's too expensive. And then subsequently, after 1974, nuclear explosion, there were heavy sanctions, so could not. So we lost a lot of time. Lesson to be learned, improvise, enter into collaboration, do DIY, which is do it yourself, or in Bharatiya context, what is called jugaad.
Yeah.
You have scientists, they'll figure out a solution. They have figured out a lot of solutions if the technology cannot be borrowed or purchased from abroad. But that has to be done. So as far as the international arms sellers, there will always be other countries willing to buy. So what? Weapons sale is a, perennial geopolitical issue.
Yeah.
Countries that are buying, Ukraine is buying all these arms from all the sources. So wherever there's a war, the suppliers will supply both the sides generally and make money. So we should not be focusing on what would be the attitude of the supplier. Let them go to hell, you develop your own. If you have capability, technological expertise, your industrial base, you should have your own domestic that safeguards national security in the long run. And there's no question of whether we do this or we do that. It's not either or question. You have to focus on everything.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So I'm moving to my next question. What do you think will India efforts to lead the India efforts of this indigenization of defense equipment will lead to regional stability, or it will result in an arms race with China? So what do you see?
We are doing the catching up. We are not indulging in arms race. We are catching up. China started its military modernization in 1980s. And China was very suitably helped by United States at each step of the way. China later on also did reverse engineering. You probably do not know, China and Pakistan have a very strong relationship for a long period of time.
Yeah.
One of the F-16 supplied by United States to Pakistan was flown secretly to China, was disassembled, everything was copied, reassembled, and flown back to Pakistan. That's how China started its own fighter aircraft, JF-17 or whatever that they are jointly, quote unquote, producing along with Pakistan.
Yeah.
China has been beneficiary of technology import from former Soviet Union, as well as with Russia. So China is way ahead of Bharat in the game. We are just trying to catch up. We cannot let this asymmetry to develop further.
Right.
We lost 10 years during the UPA time when the government was myopic and was trying to, play second fiddle to China for various reasons, which is a political discussion. So we let our defense preparedness slide down. You also have a situation that China is also arming our adversaries, including Pakistan. That is very well known. Pretty much every weapon system Pakistan has either come from United States or from China. Their F-16 are of US origin, their tanks were of US origin, but their missiles are of Chinese origin through North Korea, and their nuclear arms are based on Chinese blueprint, Chinese material, Chinese enriched uranium. The first Pakistani nuclear test was conducted in a Chinese nuclear testing site in Gobi Desert in 1990. Even before the 1998 Chagai Hills nuclear explosions that were officially done by Pakistan, they had already tested a weapon system. So the reality is that there is no arms race triggered by our defense modernization. We are just catching up. We are not instigating an arms race.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So we have 5 minutes of time, and this is my last question. So just share your views. The most biggest obstacle in India's stride in defense modernization, actually, that is the investment, the economic drain. India spends around 3% of GDP on defense and 60% of that on imports. That leads to immense economic drain. But how do you think India can finance its defense project, which is complex and big and needs huge investment and also the big time for research and developments? So do you think the major arms exporter globally will support India's efforts, and how India should deal with them?
So first clarification, our defense budget is not 3% of our GDP. That is one of the grouses. It has been for last 10 years in the range of 2.6, 2.7, 2.8. It has never touched 3%. Only once, I think in around 1985, 1986, it was 4.5% of our GDP. That was only once, and then it dropped down. So compared to that, because of the disproportionately asymmetrically larger Chinese economy and GDP, their absolute overlay is much higher than ours. And I made a case that if we are striving in next couple of years, $5 trillion economy, 3% of 5 trillion is around $175 billion or $180 billion. Our defense budget for 2023 is $74 billion. So we are under-investing in our defense budget. That is number one. We need to improve on that. How we are going to do that? One is that we need to tighten our budgetary processes at the federal level, at the central level, so that the wasteful expenditure is curtailed. And what I would say, freebies are stopped. It's better to invest money in defense rather than giving freebies, which make people lazy. Okay? People have to earn their livings. You cannot be permanently living off doles from the government. So that is one issue. Second is the corruption in the system. Our defense acquisition system was highly corrupt. Everyone knows that. That is being changed. Number three, there were cost overlays because of the delays. The same project which would be finished in $1 billion, if it is delayed by 10 years, it costs $5 billion. So if you avoid that, we have problems with capacity. And we need to build capacity further. So let's say an aircraft carrier takes 10 to 15 years to conceptualize, design, construct, and then deploy in Bharat. It is not so in other countries. Why can't we shorten this? That is number one. Number two is, with some financial investments, we can double our capacity. Once you double your capacity, it will generate more employment, not just to defense personnel, but to civilians, the factory workers, all those sort of things. There's a downstream effect on economy. Economy gets stimulated.
Sorry to interrupt you, sir, but we have only 1 minute of time left. So please finish.
So, bottom line is that a well-planned military industrial complex is needed. That is the need of the nation. If that affects the global geopolitics or global arms exporters, that is a different issue. But we desperately need to invest more in defense sector. And that is not just on pensions or personnel, but into designing capabilities in domestic arms production, whether they are cyber arms, laser arms, anti-satellite, kinetic vehicles, or aircraft carriers, or missiles, ICBMs. A strong nation cannot let its guard down.
Thank you so much, Dr. Adityanjee, for your time. This was really a very enlightening session, and we have learned a lot from you.
Pleasure is mine that you gave me opportunity to speak my mind on this platform. I hope relevant people listen to it.
Yeah, there is a lot to discuss on this topic actually. This is a very exhaustive topic actually. So we'll be meeting again soon and we'll be talking to you. Thank you, Vijay. Thank you for your time.